All right, this list is going to be a bit different. I'm going to go over like 1 mana cards that are super powerful in each color. So here we go. These 2 white cards, both Alseid of Life's Bounty and Selfless Savior, they're the 1 mana creatures that they either give like protection or indestructible. They're rescue creatures is what we're going to call them. They prevent creatures from getting removed. And they usually sacrifice themselves in the process somehow, some way. Alseid, you can pay 1, sacrifice it, gives a target creature enchantment protection from a certain color. Mind you can't pick colorless. And Selfless Savior, you sacrifice it, give target creature indestructible. Authority of the Councils, this card is just unfair. Creatures your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, you gain 1 life. The card is just unfair. It's good in every single deck, so play it. Or actually don't, because it's not fun. Ephemerate, exile target creatures you control, then return it to the battlefield under owner's control, and it's got rebound, so you play it next turn for free. These are what's called flicker spells, and this is easily the best one, is Ephemerate, by a long shot. This card is absolutely nuts. If you're playing what's called like what I like to call a bounce house deck, where you're playing off a lot of ETBs, like, oh, this card enters the battlefield, this creature enters the battlefield, and it does something right when it enters the battlefield. You play this card, and you play as many as you could. If you could play 15 of Ephemerates, you would. Esper Sentinel, whenever your opponent casts their first non-creature spell, they got to pay the tax of his power, otherwise you draw a card. It's only the first one. This card is just good. It's white card draw. White was traditionally pretty weak at card draw. It's starting to get really good at it. Fragment Reality, this card is absolutely mental. Exile target non-token artifact, creature, or enchantment. Its controller pulls out a creature with lesser mana value, puts it on the battlefield tapped straight from their deck. This is an arena-only card. This card is insanely powerful. God's Willing and Sheltering Light, they're a lot like those 2 creatures we showed before with the Alseid and the Selfless Savior. The green and white gets a ton of these. They're 1 mana spells that prevent something from being removed by either giving it protection, giving it indestructible. Hexproof is usually the green one. Green, it typically gives hexproof. There's some white ones that give hexproof too. I just picked those 2 as an example because there's a lot of them that do that. They do pretty much, they're like 1 or 2 mana counters most forms of removal. Praetor's Humiliation, this card is got a mob justice effect where you count the amount of creatures you control, it deals damage to something. We're not playing it for that. We're playing it for target creature perpetually loses all abilities. So that means even if it goes to the graveyard, it has no abilities. Blanking creatures is really, really good because sometimes you just play creatures strictly for their abilities. You don't play them for your stats. You play them for their abilities. Soul Warden is a life gain buddy. There's actually called a deck called Soul Sisters, and she's one of the sisters of the deck. She reads, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under anyone's control, you gain 1 life. This card gets out of hand really quick, makes life gain a viable strategy. Not so much because you're gaining life, it's because when you're gaining life, there's creatures that see you gaining life, and then they get their effects going off because you gained life. And this is easily the best one. The other Soul Sister is exactly like her, except she's green. We don't have her in Arena right now, but once we do, you'll definitely see Soul Sisters pop up. Swords of Plowshares, exile target creature. Its controller gains life power. Simple, this is one of the best creature removals, period, in the entire game. All right, this is the 1 mana list for blue. First, we start off with Curiosity and Curious Obsession. Both of them are kind of the same card. Curiosity means whenever a enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you draw a card. Curiosity has the combo potential. Curious Obsession, enchanted creature gets 1/1. Whenever they deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card. If they fail to attack that turn or any turn, you sacrifice Curious Obsession. They're both good. I'd say Curious Obsession, in my opinion, is a little bit better because they have 1 attack and 1 defense, really raises the clock. But Curiosity has better combo potential. The last 3 cards I just showed, they're all 1 mana bounce spells. These are really good because they set your opponent back on bouncing your opponent's creatures, planeswalkers, or enchantments, respectively. With Stern Dismissal, it can hit enchantments. Fading Hope only hits creatures. Rona's Vortex hits creatures and planeswalkers. That just you paying 1 mana for that. Granted, it's not permanent removal. It can really be annoying if you play something for 5 mana and then 1 mana, bounce it back to your hand. Yeah, you get to recast it. It's not permanent, but it's what's called a tempo swing. It really throws you off your pendulum. You know, you're like, playing my cards on time, and then nope, not anymore. Rune Crab, this is one of the best mill cards ever. It's a 0/3 that reads, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 3 cards. Now in Commander, that's 9 cards per land, 3 from each person. It's insane. Wash Away can counter anything that doesn't come from the hand for 1 mana. If it comes from the hand, you got to pay 3 mana. This card's nuts. Easily an auto-include in Commander, because that counts your Commander. That counts if you impulse draw, or pocket draw, what I like to call it, is where you tuck cards into exile and you can play them for a set period of time, usually a turn cycle or a turn at most. So it can counter anything for 1 mana, basically. It can counter a lot of things for 1 mana. All right, now we're moving on to black. Bone Shards. This card's insane. Has an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, or discard a card. Pop target creature or planeswalker. It is sorcery speed, but understand that black gets a few of these effects. The other good ones, the other noteworthy ones are Spark Harvest and Eaten Alive. Eaten Alive is, you can't discard for either one of those, both Spark Harvest and Eaten Alive, because it costs extra mana, but you can sacrifice creatures for them. And what's good about them is they hit creatures and planeswalkers. There's a few other ones that only hit creatures, but Bone Shards is definitely the best one because you can discard with it. Dark Ritual. This card's insane. You pay 1 black mana, you get 3 black mana back. So you net 2 mana from it. If you break this card, it gives you just boatloads of mana. It's not legal in Historic or traditional Historic, but it's legal in Pioneer, so you'll probably see this card quite a bit, because if you can turbo out stuff, that's really good. These next few cards I'm showing you are all 1 mana discard spells. They're all cherry picks. Cherry picks, you means you look and you pick the card. Thoughtseize hits anything, but you lose 2 life. That's not a land. Obviously, when I say anything, just automatically assume I'm talking about not lands. Inquisition of Kozilek hits anything that's mana value 3 or less. Duress hits anything that's not a creature or a land. And then Dreams of Steel of Oil hits creatures and artifacts in the hand, and then it exiles 1 creature or artifact from the graveyard. So it's either or from the hand and graveyard. So either a creature and an artifact from the hand, or a creature and an artifact from the graveyard. Either or. It's not both, because that'd be insane. Kaya's Ghost Form. This is one of the best 1 mana protection spells, period. It's an enchantment, so it sticks around. But the way it reads is, as long as your creature or your planeswalker, because it affects planeswalkers too, if it were to die or get exiled, you just return it back to the battlefield with Kaya's Ghost Form gone. So this card is insane. It's 1 mana. It's easily one of the best 1 mana protection spells, period. Stitcher Supplier enables self-mill, because whenever she enters play, she enters or mills the top 3 cards of your library, and then when she perishes, she does that again. She's really cool because it's the old school Magic art where she's holding a severed head, which is some like really crazy art. They don't do that kind of art anymore, which is unfortunate. It's a lot of like toned down, censored, kid-friendly-ish art. All right, these are the red cards. Let's go with Bomat Courier and Rotisserie Elemental. They both work kind of the same. They're 1 mana red cards. Well, Bomat Courier is colorless, but you need red to use his ability. They're both 1 mana buddies that when they attack, they get you cards kind of back into your hand some way, shape, or form. Bomat Courier is when he attacks, you exile the top card of your library face down underneath him, and then you can discard your hand and put all those exile cards into your hand. And Rotisserie Elemental, when it attacks and connects with an opponent, it gets a skewer counter, and then immediately after you can sacrifice that, and for each skewer counter you exile the top card of your library. You may play that for a turn. So they regenerate your hand for 1 mana as long as they get enough hits in or swings in. Unholy Heat, this card's unfair. This card actually got nerfed in this game. It actually does 6 damage in real life, but it deals 2 damage to our creature or planeswalker. Delirium, it does 6 instead. Delirium means you got 4 different card super types in your graveyard. So like land, sorcery, instant, creature. You know, it's really easy to get that card off, and then it's the best, probably like one of the best removals in the game, short of like something like Swords of Plowshares. And even like, it might even be better than Swords, honestly, because it doesn't give life back. Claim the Firstborn. It's a treason effect. That means you steal the creature, you get it for a turn, it gets hasted so it can attack and act for 1 turn, and then you give it back. Usually with these types of cards, though, you play them in decks where you don't plan on giving the creature back. You're just going to sacrifice the creature for your own gain. So it's a really an ill-gotten gains type of thing. Claim the Firstborn is one of the best ones. It hits any creature with mana value 3 or less. It's nuts. Faithless Looting. This is like one of the best draw spells in the entire game. It says draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. Why is this good? Because it loads your graveyard. You can go ahead and put a bunch of nasty creature threats, and even like artifacts and enchantments too, if you're reanimating artifacts or enchantments, into your graveyard, and then you're just spitting out like really, really strong artifacts or enchantments. I'll show you a few historic lists on how to really break this card wide open that I can muster. Lightning Axe. This is a lot like Bone Splinters. It's good because it does 5 damage to target creature at instant speed, but the big gaff with it is you can discard a creature with it and reanimate it. So it's a really cheap, efficient removal that loads up your graveyard that you want to be doing anyways. Because a lot of reanimator lists, that's what a reanimator list is. It puts cards in the graveyard and brings them back at efficiency, at a cheaper price. Usually a card involved, though. You got to play a card, but it costs less. Lightning Bolt's simple card. It deals 3 damage to any target. One of the best like removals. Again, if you're red, you play it. Period. It goes in every single red deck, unless it's banned. Monastery Swiftspear has haste and prowess. Haste means it can act right away. Prowess means every time you cast a non-creature spell, it gains a temporary bonus of 1 attack and 1 defense. And that stacks, so if you play 2 or 3, it can get really big really quick. Prowess creatures are pretty nuts. This is the helm of those creatures. And then Ragavan is literally probably one of the most unfair 1-drops period in the game. Right behind Authority of the Council, whenever he attacks and connects with an opponent, you make a treasure token and swipe the top card of their deck. You may play it this turn. You can't play it for any mana values or colors. So if it's like 3 blues, it might be impossible for you to cast. But you play him mainly because when he connects, he makes treasure tokens. And if you dash him, it means he gets haste, and then he jumps back into your hand at the end of the turn. This one might look a little bit awkward. This is the green list. I had to redo this part of the video because I screwed it up. So forgive me. Like, the next videos will be a lot better. Haywire Might. This card's nuts. When he perishes, you gain 3 life. You can pay a green and sacrifice him. Exile target non-creature artifact or a non-creature enchantment. I can't remember what the change is. I think this used to be 2 mana, but they made it 1. The reason this card is good is because in Historic you have a deck called Hammer Time, which will go over the Hammer card and why it's so good. But the next two cards I'm showing you are 1 mana green cards that grab creatures and or lands. Traverse the Uberwald, it just grabs lands, but if you have Delirium, again, Delirium is 4 of different cards of a different super type into your graveyard, so that's lands, creatures, planeswalkers, etc. Those are the super types. You can grab a land, but if you have Delirium, you can grab a creature instead. And Abundant Harvest reads, you pick land or non-land, dig through the top of your deck until you hit one of those declared types, and you put the card in your hand. These 1 mana draw spells with green, they're pretty decent. You don't want too many of them in your deck because they're still 1-for-1s, but they can guarantee that you get land drops early or guarantee you get your creature to play on turn 2, turn 3, so they're pretty good. Blizzard Brawl and Bushwhack kind of are honorable mentions as well because they're both fight spells, but Bushwhack also can search your library for a basic land, so it's one of those 1 mana draw land cards, which is a form of ramp. It doesn't put it onto the battlefield right away, but guaranteeing your land drops is like ramp light, we'll call it that. Blizzard Brawl, this card is unfair. This card is a super great removal, probably the 5th best 1 mana card in like probably the entire game, dang near. It reads, choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you control 3 or more snow permanents, the creature you control gets 1 attack and gains indestructible until end of your turn, and then those creatures fight each other. This card usually causes 2-for-1s in the sense that like you're hitting a creature, winning that combat, and then swinging in for probably about 4 or 5 damage, roughly. So your opponent's taking 4 or 5 there. And you're removing one of their guys. And if they're forced to chump block, if they're taking too much damage, it's usually like a 2-for-1. And probably a 3-for-1 because half the time the creature will probably have trample. I'm showing you some 1 mana dweebs. You'll see them in a lot of like Gruul lists and Atali Primal Conqueror type of lists. They're just cards that they're 1 mana guys that what the creature does is it helps you get other cards sooner, that you play cards sooner than you should. That's what ramp means. So Delighted Halfling reads, it adds 1 colorless, but it's mainly good for legendaries. Add 1 mana of any color, spend that to only cast legendaries. Those legendaries can't be countered. You can only do that once per turn because you got to tap it. Gilded Goose is good in like multicolored lists because you can tap it and sacrifice a food, and it makes a mana of any color. So that's what makes it good. Hardened Scales, this card is like literally a deck archetype in itself. It reads, if 1 or more 1/1 counters will be put on a target creature you control, you put that many plus 1 instead. So it adds more 1/1 counters, which makes your creatures bigger faster. So they promote a more lethal clock for your opponent. It speeds the clock up by like 2 or 3 turns. This deck, or this card, literally makes an entire archetype itself. When I start doing more of my historic content, you will definitely be seeing me play this card a whole bunch because I play 1/1 counters a lot. Mystic Repeal is an honorable mention. This card is an absolutely menace of a hate card for enchantments. It says put target enchantment on the bottom of its owner's library for 1 mana at instant speed. Just nope, get that enchantment out of here. Putting it straight to the bottom of the deck. This card is like probably arguably, as far as 1 mana or 1 single target enchantment hate cards, it's the strongest in like the entire game, practically. It really is. Tamiyo Safekeeping. You can't read the whole thing, but it says target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn you gain 2 life. Those are a lot like the white cards we went over, where it's like it protects it from removal. So, and Tamiyo Safekeeping, I think, is one of the strongest ones because it covers permanence, so you can pick anything. Veil of Summer is a color hate card. It says draw a card if opponent has cast a blue or black spell, and then you gain hexproof from blue and hexproof from black. And yeah, that's it. Oh, and your spells can't be countered, which really, that really hoses blue. That doesn't really do too much to black. This is a color hate card where it like picks a color or two, and it does a really strong effect against those types of colors. This card is completely banned in a lot of formats because a lot of blue and black decks, it literally shuts off their turn for 1 mana. Is why that card is banned. It's really, really, really strong. So I gave myself some room here. All right, this is Colossus Hammer. That deck I talked about with Haywire Might, Hammer Time, this is the card that makes it Hammer Time. It says equipped creature gets 10 attack and 10 defense and loses flying. It's 1 mana, but equips for 8. Well, the way Hammer Time works is you play Hammer already equipped to something for usually like 1 or 2 mana. So by turn 3, if a Hammer Time deck goes off, by turn 3, you're facing down an 11-11 or a 12-12, which is pretty big. Usually sometimes that 12-12 or 11-11 also has trample. So it's going to close the game out in about 2 swings. So that's why I've been playing a lot of Haywire Might. You'll see that a lot in Historic. I'll show it to you when we play that. Lantern of the Lost. These are 1 mana hate on the graveyard cards. I just picked Lantern of the Lost because it hits both graveyards, so it's not great in self-reanimation or self-mill lists, but it always draws a card. That's why I think it's good in a lot of lists that don't care about their graveyard. It's the best one. There's tons of them. There's Lantern of the Lost like this. There's another Lantern from Theros. I can't remember the name of that. There's Sentinel's Totem. That's from the old Ixalan set. And there's a few other ones. That's just to name a few. There's Tormod's Crypt. That's 0 mana. I should go over the 0 mana cards, but those don't really exist in colored. There's only like a few colorless 0 mana cards, and they're not really that great. Besides Tormod's Crypt. Manifold Key is here for its top ability, not its bottom ability. Its bottom ability is good. It reads, untap target another target artifact, or a target creature can't be blocked this turn. The untapping another target artifact is very breakable in what's called a Tron deck. A Tron deck is it plays a lot of colorless cards, and the way they win the game is they take such long turns that they just do so much stuff that they get like 50 turns ahead of you in 1 turn. That's basically how they attempt to win the game. I put Shadow Spear here, and I think this card is excellent. It says equipped creature you control gains 1 attack, 1 defense, lifelink, and trample. So it helps you win the race. It gives you a little bit of evasion and a little bit of toughness and attack. And it can remove hexproof and indestructible from opponents' permanents. They just all lose it. The Ozolith is a shoe-in for counters list. It says if a creature that you have counters on would be removed, You remove the creature, sure, but all those counters would usually go away. Well, they get put onto the Ozolith, and then the Ozolith holds on to them until your next combat, and you can shift them from the Ozolith onto a creature. It's pretty funny having an Ozolith that has like flying and hexproof. And granted, it's not a creature, but it's just funny, the little animation of the flying hexproof indestructible Ozolith. It's very possible. You'll definitely see me play this in Historic. And the last but not least is Witch's Oven. This is one of the best sacrifice cards ever. It says sacrifice a creature, create a food token. If it has toughness 4 or more, you create 2 food tokens instead. Why is this good? Because the sacrifice is free. It doesn't cost any mana. That's what makes this card good. A lot of sacrifice decks, you want them to sacrifice for free. So, and that's the list, so thank you for your time. There's plugs. That's the Grinch Buster. I'm trying out a new photo editing software. Tell me if you like it or don't. Anyways, I appreciate your time. We're going to be doing more of these lists. This is the first one. Farewell.